Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about Fani Willis's subpoena of Bernie Kerik, former New York police commissioner and kind of odd hanger-on with Rudy Giuliani of all people for the Fulton County trial. All right, so Kerik is actually one of the many. There were, I think, 30 in all, as opposed to the 19 that wound up being charged that the special grand jury had recommended charging. So in that sense, he avoided the big trouble. But now Fani Willis says she wants him to testify, and his lawyer fired back with a very strong letter saying, basically, pound sand, Fani Willis. I wouldn't think of letting him testify unless you give him immunity. That is, unless you strike a formal deal that says that he won't be subject to any criminal penalties. And moreover, says his lawyer, I want you to stitch it up also with Jack Smith so Kerik isn't subject to any federal penalties either. And that's something, of course, that really hasn't happened yet in certain dual prosecutions where things are going on at the same time. You might have expected coordination, but for a number of reasons, we haven't seen a lot of it here. So Kerik is taking that hard stance, and he says, go ahead, call me, but if you don't give me immunity, I'm just going to go up and assert the Fifth Amendment. Now, you're only supposed to assert the Fifth Amendment if your testimony would tend to incriminate you. And his lawyer says in the same breath, he's done nothing wrong. There's no reason for him to take the Fifth, but I'm going to do it. And that's, that little protest notwithstanding, it's perfectly proper stance for him to take. You got a guy who the previous special grand jury wanted to charge, and who, if he's called to the stand, could say things that really could be used to bring charges against him. All right, why? What's Kerik's role in all this? As I say, he's mainly a sort of hanger-on with Giuliani. He's somebody who's fallen long and far, as Giuliani has, a former fairly well-regarded police commissioner who's gone to jail already and is out. Giuliani had him kind of forage around trying to find fraud, and he basically, couldn't turn up anything. He's already met with, not in the grand jury, but with prosecutors from Jack Smith's team, and laid out what he knows. But he's basically said, and this is coming before a court as well, that he looked around and didn't see a lot of fraud. But he is a guy who's just kind of Rudy's guy. So among other involvement in this post-election period, where as we're learning more and more, there are just people who are kind of hangers on, and because of Trump's predilection for wanting to hear what he wants to hear, it doesn't take much. That's your sort of admission ticket if you're just willing to maybe say or do crazy things, as with Eastman and Powell and Chesbrough and the like. All right, so Kerik, first he attends a couple meetings with state officials. They're not from Georgia, they're from Arizona and Pennsylvania, but they're of a similar tenor of trying to change the lawful election results. And remember, Fani Willis, by charging RICO, has brought in all this conduct, even conduct that is outside of Georgia state, because what she's saying is there was this big plan, and the object of it was to, yes, get the votes from Georgia. That's what she's charging, that were rightfully Biden's, to go to Trump's. But there's all kinds of conduct that is part and parcel of this basically criminal enterprise. So it's not just what they did in Georgia, it's also what they did in Arizona and Pennsylvania. And so Kerik is implicated there. That's one reason why the special grand jury recommended indicting him. He is also in a meeting that's really pretty important that takes place at the White House on November 25th, 2020. And that's with, again, Pennsylvania folks, possibly to include Scott Perry, who introduces Trump, remember, to Jeff Clark. But Meadows is there, Giuliani is there, Jenna Ellis is there. So that figures in some way that they would want him to testify to, and that would be part of why he is called. When he testified, or excuse me, when he spoke with the federal authorities, he was able to get a proffer letter, meaning that he was able to just talk to them and with assurances that he wouldn't be charged. Here, Fani Willis has first taken a pretty combative pose, saying, look, we're not suggesting we're going to charge you. You are not an unindicted co-conspirator here in the complaint, and we just are going to subpoena you for the information. It seems to me, however, that if Kerik, draws a line in the sand and says, I'm not doing it without immunity, and push comes to shove, I don't think she'd be able to force him, and she might well need to give him immunity. Now, immunity for the feds is a whole different issue. And you can imagine a legal claim coming up here where he's been immunized by the Georgia authorities. And so his testimony would intend to incriminate him under Georgia law, but not by the federal authorities. And he's saying, I still invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. That's something that could play out. All right. So in summary, he's not the biggest witness, but he's especially close to Giuliani. There's probably a fair bit more he could say that we don't know yet, where Giuliani went. Kerik essentially was his private investigator to Giuliani's lawyer. So he gathers information showing there's not fraud, probably tells it to Giuliani. That's bad news for Giuliani. Participates in some meetings, generally knows what's going down during this period, at least to the extent Giuliani does. So he could be an important material witness, even in this first trial involving Powell and Ken Chesbrough. Powell works very closely with Giuliani, and indeed the subpoena is sort of one more kind of shot across the bow for Sidney Powell. If he were to testify, it could tend to inculpate her, and she's already really sweating it from Scott Hall's guilty plea about the Coffee County episode that she was well involved in. Okay, so we'll see how it plays out with Kerik. If he stays insistent, I don't think Fani Willis can force him, so maybe she gives him immunity, but then what happens with the feds? That all ought to be playing out over the next couple weeks, because, a jury is going to be picked starting October 20th, and we're going into the first trial. Between that and the fraud case already underway in New York State Court, it's really getting real for Donald Trump. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.